A couple of housekeeping things. There's a bathroom right through that door to the right if anybody needs it. You will all stay until every cookie is gone. And, if you have a cell phone, if you could silence it, that would be great. I just want to welcome everybody on behalf of the Just Peace team here at the Mount Congregational Church. I'd like to thank you all for coming out here to take part in this forum on immigration. We find ourselves in a moment in history when astronomical numbers of our brothers and sisters are in motion on the earth. Frequently, they made a heart-wrenching decision to leave their homeland, whether fleeing poverty, oppression, persecution, violence, war, extreme weather, or environmental disasters. In our country and the other destinations they choose, they hear a promise of something better, an improved life for their family, relief from their stress and duress. Our profound hope is that today's gathering will enhance our understanding of the issues facing our migrating brothers and sisters, in our local area. Perhaps more importantly, we hope to gain some awareness of opportunities that we as individuals or churches, communities, might avail ourselves of in order to be agents of welcome, hope, and assistance to our newest neighbors. So we're lucky, we're blessed to have three excellent representatives from New Bedford here to address us today. These three women have dedicated huge parts of their life to serving the immigrant communities in our region. Corinne Williams is with us from the Community Economic Development Center of Southeastern Massachusetts in New Bedford, which she co-founded in 1997. She's been the executive director of the CEDC since 2002. Her work there is involved creating economic opportunities through numerous community development programs and efforts. Under Corinne's leadership, the CEDC has become a premier resource center for many immigrants in New Bedford's North End, providing a wide-ranging support from programs such as financial literacy, English as a second language classes, small business support, and basic needs assistance. In 2017, Corinne was selected as a social innovator by the Social Innovation Forum in Boston, Woman of the Year in 2015 and 2021, and was recognized as a Commonwealth Heroine by the Mass Commission on Status of Women. Helena De Silva Hughes comes to us from the Immigrants Assistance Center in New Bedford. Helena emigrated here to the U.S. from the Madeira Islands with her family at the age of 10, nearly 15 years ago. Helena graduated from New Bedford High School and holds a BS in Business Administration with a minor in law from Newberry College. She's a graduate of the UMD Leadership South Coast. Beginning her tenure at the IAC in 1984, she was promoted to executive director in 1996. And in 2022, she was promoted to president of the IAC to focus on immigration at the state and federal level. She's developed and implemented numerous programs based on the needs of the immigrant community with a focus on the IAC's mission. She is bilingual, bicultural, in Portuguese with strength in Spanish. She's been the keynote speaker at state, national, and international events on topics of immigration. Her dedication and passion for working with the immigrant community has earned her numerous awards, including South Coast Woman of the Year. And last but certainly not least, Molly Lim is the coordinator of community education at the City of New Bedford Department of Community Services. She's involved with the development and implementation of programs such as Shining Lights and New Beginnings, which combines English instruction with civic literacy, shepherding new residents through their integration into new community. She's also a coordinator for the New Bedford Regional Local Consumer Program. She obtained a BA in East Asian Studies from Wesleyan, a master's in intercultural relations, as well as a JD recently from the UMass Dartmouth School of Law. This year, she opened her own immigration law firm. We became aware of Molly really most recently through her work with SAN, the South Coast Afghan Welcome Network. So, we're well attended to today. And I would like to give you each just some time to tell us what you need to tell us. And then hopefully we'll have some questions.
So first of all, thank you so much for being here this afternoon. So I'm actually working at the Immigrants Assistance Center for 38 years. I feel like it's not a job, it's a mission. I believe that we're all born with a mission, and I was very lucky to find mine at the age of 23 when I started working at the Immigrants Assistance Center and saw the impact that we can make on our new arrivals that were coming into the United States. So I have to say that immigration is my background. I have to say that several years ago, Mayor Mitchell was very interested in having New Bedford as a refugee resettlement. And so that was a topic that we had been talking for the past 4 years on this. And then all of a sudden, we knew our refugees from Afghanistan were arriving, and so we knew that the families and we knew that these families that were coming in were our allies. So it was extremely important that we found housing. I know housing became a huge issue, and we know that as the Immigrants Assistance Center, we are not a resettlement agency, but we know that the International Institute of New England, that's what they do. So people were very confused. What is the difference between an immigrant and a refugee? And I think that's a great topic to start. So immigrants come, just like my parents come, because they want to immigrate, looking for the American dream, give their children a better life. That's why my parents immigrated, and I would say the majority of our immigrants in our area immigrated because of that. But so refugees come because they have no choice. They basically have to leave their country, and they leave everything. So the difference between an immigrant is there is a choice. With a refugee, there are no choices. So to me, it became very important that since International Institute of New England, that's what they do, refugee resettlement. So what happens is they provide support, they pay the rent, so it's very different than the work that we're doing, but right away we knew that we needed to also be involved. So when we started hearing and working very closely with Molly in the city as the new refugees that are coming in was, what could we do? I remember the first time a family arrived was like, we need to get housing. Housing is huge. As we probably all know, New Bedford has a housing crisis. We can't find apartments. It was very difficult to really start finding houses. And then we found 1 apartment, 2 apartments. So then we couldn't really get that many families here, but from what I understand, there are 5 families in New Bedford. There's 6 now, but there's 1 in Dartmouth. Is that counting? Also, there's 2 in Dartmouth, yeah. So there's some of them that have moved out and have gone to other areas. So right away we knew that we needed to also help, and then there's a network that created with volunteers. But what we did was we knew that the women were illiterate. A lot of these women were illiterate. So we have created a literacy class specifically for Afghanistan families, which is on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So basically really working and connecting with other organizations like Corinne and Molly really to work. But I have to say, I have to give kudos to the mayor's office because he really stepped up on helping our Afghanistan families. But at the same time, we're also getting calls from Ukraine. What's happening with Ukraine? So I would say that there's also, so this isn't going to go away. Except in Ukraine, people want to stay in Europe because they want to go home. So that's really the difference, but I'm going to stop at that. So immigration is something that I've been doing it for 38 years. So it's really interesting how to see the new waves of immigrants that are coming in and what's happening and the needs, how there's some of the needs exactly the same, but some have changed. So I'm going to stop. I'll be here, so I'm sure we'll have lots of other conversations. So I'm going to pass it on to Corinne.
Thanks, Melina. I'm really, really excited and honored to be here today because I remember being in this very room just a short time ago, but it seems like ages ago before the pandemic and before this whole journey that we've all been on for the last couple of years. And during that time prior, we talked about the kind of work that we were doing over at the CDC, kind of focused on the north end of New Bedford and kind of looking at the kind of work that we did, working on anything and everything from providing some support for English classes to helping with tax preparation. So we do a wide variety of things, but the pandemic certainly has changed the kind of work that we've been involved in. We know that during the pandemic, so many of the people that we were working with lost income, or they contracted COVID, and during that time where there was no availability of vaccines, also, were really impacted very, very heavily. So we knew that during that time, during that crisis time, we made a decision that we needed to open our doors because it was terribly difficult for the people that we were working with, primarily folks from Central America that had language barriers and also literacy barriers, but also, in particular, technology barriers. Like for applying for any kind of benefit, you needed to go online. All the state offices were closed, but we made it a point to open our doors just months after we had to shut down, where most of us had to shut down. So we were providing these front-end services and working with, after we opened up, we started working with an average of about 150 people a week that found us. And they knew we were there, and we had, we set up barriers to be able to be COVID safe and so forth, but at the same time, we were able to, provide that kind of direct support. And some of you might know that unfortunately, about a year ago, our office was displaced in a fire. Our building burnt down along with our neighbor's building, and which displaced about 44 tenants in the building, and also destroyed our office. Our team was able to regroup very quickly, and we were hosted by PACA for a number of months until we found a new home on Acushnet Avenue. And as you know, working in a neighborhood like on Acushnet Avenue, it's home to so much of our immigration story in New Bedford, including my own family's story as well. And I'm so lucky to have this front row seat to see this ongoing history unfold as the families who were once newcomers are now opening up small businesses or becoming first-time home buyers, or helping their kids build a better future. At the same time, the CDC continues to work with a lot of newcomers from Central America, those people who are fleeing violence, looking for asylum at the border, or the children who have traveled to the border as unaccompanied minors. Throughout the pandemic, these children and families continue to arrive and continue to find the CDC for support. At one point, a few months ago, we would speak to maybe 3 to 5 families a week who were recently arrived from the border, and we continue to provide that kind of support. I also had a chance in 2019, before the pandemic hit, to spend about a week in a shelter at the border to talk to some of these families who were fleeing violence. So I got to see firsthand what those stories were, listen to people who were fleeing the situation from countries that were overrun by gangs, kids who were teenagers that couldn't live their childhood because they were pressed into gang service or fleeing from death threats and violence. So these are the families that are following us here in New Bedford to be part of our community, to be part of the fabric of our community. And I'm really fortunate that I was able to listen to those stories to get that kind of perspective and insight. And I know from the things that kind of go on from having these kind of conversations in a room like this, we were able to build an amazing network of interfaith folks who stepped forward as part of the transportation network. And I know some people are here who volunteered to bring people into ICE check-ins or to court appointments. That all changed with the pandemic, obviously, because volunteering became kind of perilous as well. But at the same time, some of this stuff, some of these appointments got modified a bit, so it made it a little bit easier on the transportation piece. So the ICE check-ins are now done online. Some of the immigration court is done virtually. So in a way, it mitigated a little bit of the burden on the transportation piece. But we still continue to have that kind of need. We've had a case where a young man who was 16 years old and came to the border as an unaccompanied minor, and he was examined when he got to the shelter and had a congenital heart defect. And they were able to transfer him to Boston Children's, yet at the same time the family needed to go up to Boston Children's to get their medication and that kind of thing. So there's still that transportation need, although it's not as acute as it used to be. So we know that these families, including the families and the amazing work that's being done to resettle the refugee families from Afghanistan, we know that there's a lot of unofficial refugees living in our community as well, and they continue to need our support, helping them navigate through systems, registering at school, getting immunizations, and kind of piecing together some of the legal representation piece. Many of the pro bono organizations like South Coast County's Legal Services or Catholic Social Services, they're closed for intake. So we're having an event on Wednesday where they're providing legal orientation, but also connecting them to other kinds of resources and potentially private attorneys that may be willing to take some cases pro bono. And again, just wanted to reiterate the condition and how our immigrant neighbors are essential workers, and they've been some of the hardest hit due to the kind of working conditions in congregate settings that made folks vulnerable to COVID. And as Helena talked about, this crisis in affordable housing that we're facing in New Bedford has created overcrowded conditions to continue to and we continue to contend with the pandemic and the virus. So we've been really lucky at the CDC to be part of ongoing collaborative efforts to reach community members, to host vaccine clinics at our center, and build on some of our partnerships with Greater New Bedford Community Health Center that's hired a young woman who's a community health worker who spends time at the CDC. She speaks Quiche, and she links people to links these underserved folks in healthcare to these vital services. So we're always looking for volunteers, for different volunteer opportunities to kind of help us work on some of these initiatives. And I do want to give a shout out to Liz DiCarlo, who kind of planted the seed to get us brainstorming about how to bring some of those healthcare services to the neighborhood. This is a little bit of a surprise. I might have mentioned this to you also, Drew, that I've invited Marlene Cerritos, who is one of our collaborative partners for a really innovative program called Mujeres Victoriosas. And if she could share her story as well. I don't know if you want to pass it on to... Okay, come on up, Marlene. Thank you. You can sit right now.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Sorry for the noisy entrance. So my name is Marlene Rivas. A little bit about myself. I grew up in El Salvador, came to the United States about 17, 18 years ago, and my family settled in New Bedford. And really I think Corinne beautifully stated all the hardships that a lot of Central American communities go through while they are in settling and adjusting. But I was really lucky to meet an organization that did a lot of youth organizing, and through that I was able to go to college and have this really great interest in public health, which is what I'm doing now. So because of everything that I had seen before even the pandemic hit as a child, with a lot of my family members and my community working in fisheries and really going through a lot of tough situations, especially around healthcare and access to healthcare, I had this really great interest in figuring out ways that we can start tackling some of those systemic issues and making it easier for everyone to have access to healthcare. So I went on to college, did my master's in public health, and then thankfully during the pandemic came back to New Bedford. Corinne had already started this really amazing group of women called Mujeres Victoriosas. And really what that group is a group of Central American women, and what we do is a lot of women organizing, women empowerment, and building leadership. So a lot of the leaders, so I do a lot of the managing, the background stuff, and we have leaders from Guatemala, from El Salvador, Honduras, and slowly expanding beyond to other Latin American countries. But what they do is they come together, they address some of the things, the needs that they might have, and we link them to resources in other organizations that can come and teach them about the resources so they can become resource coordinators. So what we are seeing is that a lot of women or individuals in the community come to these leaders and ask, hey, where can I go and enroll in insurance? And these women will link them to either Corinne's office or link them to the different resources in the city. So then that is slowly taking off a burden in a lot of the organizations in New Bedford who are client facing and are serving these communities to kind of shift this idea of their peers becoming these resources for them. And they've done a lot of great work, especially around the education system. So we're starting to work with the education system to incorporate some culturally relative recipes into the menus, into the New Bedford Public Schools. A change that hasn't been done in 40 years. So and this was before my time when they started, but the women will tell the story of they went to the education department and they asked like, hey, how can we collaborate together in order to improve the menus? And individuals there were like, people have been doing this for 40 years, you'll never get any farther than that. And they were like, no, we are. So they kept going, they kept pushing, and then finally in March 18th was the first time that so before that they had talked to the staff how to make this really traditional soup. It's like a chicken soup, but they do it very differently, and the ingredients, the vegetables are all from Latin America, so they had taught the staff to do that. And in March 18th, they implemented it like school-wide. So all kids in New Bedford Public Schools had the option to eat this soup and to learn about the new vegetables that they were trying that a lot of them might have not tried. So we were able to get evaluations from that, and it's just really amazing to see the work, the grassroots work that's coming out of that, and also a lot of the leadership development, right? So all mothers who previously might have felt that the school system wasn't serving them because of education are now coming and saying, hey, like, can we push the education system to send like messages in Spanish as opposed to English? Or is there something that we can do about the health system? How can we ensure that, like dental services is a really big need in our community. If you don't have insurance, you can't have dental services. So really helping find these needs, and that has improved me in my work that I do. So aside from working with Mujeres Victoriosas, I also work with Partners in Health, which is an organization that focuses on global health equity. And when the pandemic happened, we made this transition into the US. So we started identifying organizations all over the country who really were burdened by COVID, and that never really had any relief from the spread of COVID. And we started working, and New Bedford was one of these communities, so I've been working there since August, and it's a really interesting role because I'm inside working with the health department, working with organizations, and really pushing for language justice, for language equity, and ensuring that we can form a team of interpreters and translators that can be really contracted to serve organizations that don't necessarily have the capacity to communicate, and that's not just for Spanish, it's for many other languages. And then how does the city and the government have a role in that, has been one of our biggest questions. So that's a little bit about Mujeres Victoriosas. and it'll be out there. They're planning a lot of great work, so I wouldn't be surprised in the next couple of years you'll be hearing from them, and they'll be sitting in these type of panels talking about the great work that they do themselves.
Thank you so much.
Could you tell us your name again?
Oh, Marlene Cerrito Rivas.
We'll have you write that down. Hello, my name is Molly Lim, and as Drew mentioned, I work for the City of New Bedford, Department of Community Services. I've been there for 15 years. I actually began there as an intern. I was studying, I was working on my master's degree in intercultural communication for Lesley University, and I did my internship at City Hall, and when my internship ended, I ended up getting a full-time job there. Part of the work I did at the beginning was working on grant writing and program development for the city's English as a second language classes. The New Bedford Public Schools runs a whole series of adult basic ed, including English as a second language, but our department also ran an ESL program that focused on civic literacy, basically knowing what to do when you moved in the United States, how to navigate bureaucracy and City Hall, basically how to be a good citizen, how to understand how to ride the bus, the SERTA bus system, knowing when to put out your garbage, where to go if you were having problems with the food stamp application, and basically just, bureaucracy is tough for even native English speakers, and so we ran that. I helped to do grant writing for that program for several years, and then 6 years ago, I decided I want to become a lawyer as my retirement career, my retirement goal was to become an attorney. So I started, I enrolled at UMass Law. They have a wonderful public interest fellowship program, public interest law fellowship. And I decided to enter the immigration track because I knew that after working at City Hall and working with immigrants for years, I knew there was there are not enough immigration attorneys out there, especially in this area. And I went to law school nights and weekends for 5.5 years. I've actually done lots of programs with Helena and I remember one of the first events I did as an intern was a citizenship drive that Helena coordinated with the professor who ran the immigration clinic at UMass Law. That's the first time I met Helena. I also met Corinne when I was an intern. I believe it was a U visa meeting, workshop that Corinne had organized with the police and the DA's office and the sheriff's office, educating law enforcement about the U visas and the T visas for victims of violence, victims of human trafficking. And that's when I first met, Corinne. And then during law school, when I was in the immigration clinic, we would do outreach at Corinne's CDC offices, working on asylum applications for undocumented immigrants who are seeking asylum. And so even though I was still a student, when Mayor Mitchell announced that he wanted to establish New Bedford as a sanctuary city, and he announced that New Bedford would be receiving refugees for the first time, he put the project under the leadership of Janet Barboza, who's his special director for special events and special projects. And so I jumped at the chance of joining what eventually became the South Coast Afghan Welcome Network. The name's changed a few times, so I'm still trying to remember it, but it's SAWN, S-A-W-N now. And it's a network that just kind of grew organically from a collection of people from all over the region, faith providers, faith groups, services providers in the city, Elena, volunteers, just anyone who was interested in welcoming